Well, I totally know she's buying the Stairway to Heaven, but did she lay down a down payment or anything? Because that's got to be really expensive if she's just going to buy the Stairway to Heaven right there on the spot. I'd say like do 3 monthly payments. Hi, welcome back to my channel, Conglomeration Cat. Welcome back to part two of the vinyl collection that we have done maybe in the past year or so. And I'm just going to jump right to it. So this is an interesting one. And it's one of those that still kind of baffles me to this very moment. When I was maybe in sixth or seventh grade, probably seventh grade, let's go with that. My dad had a sign shop called Sign Man Sign Company on our property, and he would often hire on, I wouldn't say like work assistants, but he would hire on bodies to kind of mend the shop. So that meant if he was going out to the field to do like an actual quote for a sign, or if he was going to go ahead and actually install a sign, he needed somebody to be at the shop to take phone calls, to do paperwork, invoices, just to kind of mend the actual property of the shop while he went out and did what he had to do and then come back. He had, which became a very good friend of the family. His name was Mike Marks, and he was a very, very loving teddy bear of a guy. He looked like he could be a pro wrestler, a bouncer. He had the physique that was very much like Lou Ferrigno. And as a kid, I never was intimidated by him. I didn't always know what to say because I was a chocolate chip compared to his physique. But he was always very gentle with me. He was very nice, and he had the most infectious laugh. And my dad was a kind of a cartoon figure character anyway. So Mike really fed off of that, and I could often hear them laugh probably more than actually get actual work done half the time when they were working together. It was great to be in the room with them. We were invited to Mike's place for dinner, I think, on a weekend, and I finally met Mike's wife, and her name was Mitzi. And they had a pretty good record collection back then. It was pretty extensive. I remember that it was more on the floor, so I'm sure they were in crates or they were stood up on certain shelves, but it was on the floor. So I remember that I had to sit on the floor and asked if I can go through her record collection. I stumbled upon Genesis. And keep in mind, this is 1983 that this was going on. So obviously, their self-titled album that had the yellow and black cover that I think what looked like to be like projection pieces, like the actual game. Um, That's All, I think, was like the biggest song off that album. I think at that point, that thing was almost kind of maybe bumping heads with the Police's Every Breath You Take. That thing went to number one real quick. So I really liked the feel of that song. I liked the melody. I liked Phil Collins' voice because it was often husky and confrontational. There's just something kind of hard edge about it. I remember she sat on the floor with me and she asked me if I liked Genesis, and I told her what I was into, but I didn't really know any of their works before that. So she said that if I gave her a blank tape, that she would make like a Genesis compilation tape, or she would make a tape of what she felt were good intros or introductions to some of their earlier works before Phil Collins really set foot to be the lead singer of the group. So she made a cassette, and side A was A Trick of the Tail. And I wore that tape out. Side A was this album, and side B, I think, was either Three Sides Live or maybe some of Duke's, just to fill in some space on the tape to make it a completed compilation tape. I don't remember side B too much, but side A contained the whole entirety of Trick of the Tail. And I remember being really intrigued and not knowing what to do with it at first because the time signatures were so mathematical and so left field. It was nothing like what I've heard before. It was like listening to math problems or like arithmetic if arithmetic had music put to it. But I was intrigued. I certainly didn't turn it off. I didn't, just not listen to it. It took me a good month to really get my brain to wrap around it. And sadly, I don't have that tape anymore. But as of last year, before my wife and I went to Ferndale in October, we always go to Ferndale in October. I kept thinking in the back of my head because maybe something played at work or maybe something played somewhere where it suddenly sparked an interest about Genesis' Trick of the Tail. I remember having that on cassette, and I told Lauren, and I said, I really want to see if they have it at Crossroads. And sure enough, they did. This is the copy that I actually found. Again, really nice condition. I didn't have time to play it before we left for Ferndale. Remember that that's one of the few things that I'm going to listen to when we get back from our trip because we had 2 weeks off. We had 1 week to be in Ferndale, then we generally have a week off from work after it so we can just relax and do whatever we want to do. And I think the first night we got back into town after we unpacked, I remember that Lauren went off to bed. And when she normally does it, if she has an opening shift, I'll put on headphones on the couch and I'll literally take an album out and listen to it from front to back. Or I'll have a cassette. I'll generally listen to music before I go to bed. It's just something that helps me unwind, gets me out of the thoughts about work, and it's just something I've done pretty much all my life. And I sat and I listened to Trick of the Tail, and I played it once all the way through, and then I found myself playing it again right after the first run. I played it twice in one night. And something inside of me just went, wow, it sounds better and it sounds so much more in depth than what it was when I was young, obviously, because I obviously was a kid. I didn't know about signed signatures. I didn't know about key changes. I didn't know about harmony. I didn't know about anything really that I could articulate in my vocabulary of speaking. But after those two runs of playing that front to back, I suddenly got into Genesis. It's like that was the thing that made me go down the rabbit hole. And I certainly knew of Peter Gabriel. I've known about Sledgehammer, Big Time, Your Eyes. I hear that voice again. Salisbury Hill. I mean, I knew all that because that was our radio DNA. I mean, everywhere you went, those songs were just, you couldn't avoid them. They were just everywhere. And I liked all of them, but I never went and bought anything by him or really anything of Genesis for that matter. Probably because it was just sensory overload. It was just too much play. But I still thought that they were good. So after Trick of the Tail, I started to go on YouTube because YouTube is a fantastic Rolodex of archives and concert footage and clips and interviews. I mean, you can easily piss away a whole week of just YouTube surfing easily. And I started to click on things like the Midnight Special, where they had Watcher of the Skies and Musical Box with the Peter Gabriel years. And I found myself just absolutely mesmerized. Like, the only question that kept popping into my head is, why now? Why is it now that in my early 50s, I'm like literally in the deep end of early Genesis up to Trick of the Tail when obviously Phil Collins took over the mic. But why now? That is really interesting. I've had so much exposure with Genesis throughout my whole growing up that it's just now where it has some actual adhesive that it's sticking with me, and I really want to know about their chemistry. I want to know about their early albums, and there was just a laundry list of questions that I was really signed up for. So again, Crossroads was kind of the place to go because I didn't really want to go on eBay and collect. I heard that it's kind of not a nightmare, but it is definitely rummaging through a lot of different variations, a lot of UK pressings. The Charisma labels, from what I understand, don't sound all that well. It's one of the first times that like a remaster or something that was fixed actually sounds better, that things are brought out to the mix closer than, say, way back here. So I went down the rabbit hole. I thought, I'll just start and see, but this was before we went to Ferndale. And again, it always happens where I go into any record store and it's just on that level of curiosity. It's not so much of a goal or it's not so much of a mission. It's just curiosity takes over. I wonder if they'll have some early Genesis albums, dot, dot, dot. And it's kind of like someone goes, here you go. Okay, thanks. That's kind of crazy. So I started out with their very first album. And yeah, I was kind of taken back because I went, oh, there's no prog element to this at all. This is like them wanting to be the Bee Gees and the Moody Blues kind of put into format, which ironically, London was their record label. And I think that's what the Moody Blues was on. And eventually Threshold and I think maybe Decca. But started out with that and went, okay, well, it's interesting to have. And everyone knows the story that when this thing came out, it got put into the religious section of record stores. So this thing maybe was 500 or 700 albums pressed and no one cared. So I always felt that to be interesting. And then I started to go by chronological order. Most of these I found at Crossroads. There's only a couple that I actually purchased back in the UK off of eBay, and they took forever to get here. But again, well worth the wait. Got Trespass. Like I said, going on YouTube and seeing some like reactionary videos and some review videos gave me, gave me the homework of what to look out for. And it's interesting because look at the illustrations. This is just so cool. It's interesting because Lauren really likes video games. She's a total gamer, and she loves a lot of like actual Mario Brothers oriented stuff. She loves Nintendo, but she also loves Final Fantasy and some of those reality. I wouldn't call them reality games, but you kind of know what I'm talking about. And I remember her playing these video games and thinking, wow, I'm really intrigued with the soundtrack because there's always a soundtrack underneath some of the battle, games that go on and some of the actual story plots that go through. And I remember thinking, wow, I think she would either really like Rush or Genesis, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, King Crimson, Yes, because they almost have those kind of prog elements in the games. Like the soundtracks are almost proggy, and I thought, I'm going to turn her on to this and see how she takes to it. And when she heard Trick of the Tail, she was automatically just blown away and just like, I feel like I'm playing one of my games because it's very similar. It's very similar passages, time signatures, key changes. It's a very melodic landscape for a lot of gamers. So that's what made us get into collecting Genesis albums, especially the early stuff, especially the Peter Gabriel years. Again, we were so fortunate to find these out in the wild. We didn't have to do a lot of waiting. We didn't have to do a lot of research necessarily. They just kind of arrived. Time and place. I am such a firm believer. If there's a religion that I have, it's time and place. You can't plan it. You can't plan it. You can't really set yourself up for it. It's either you're there or it's meant to be, or either you're not and it's not meant to be. There's nothing in between. I think this is a UK pressing. This is a UK pressing. This is the one that George Peckham actually did the mastering on. He's kind of like a secondary Robert Ludwig, brings everything out to the forefront, has a lot of dynamics in the mastering. And then the cutting of the lacquer. We got two copies. One's Canadian, one is actually from England. Just luck of the draw that we got these in wonderful condition. They're all on the Charisma label. It's interesting because we actually heard the actual streaming versions first, or we heard the ones on YouTube first, which are very upfront. Some of them have a little too much compression, but they're pretty even balanced. But that's YouTube. When we got the albums, we noticed that some of the passages or some of the quiet parts of like Supper's Ready or Musical Box or Watcher of the Skies that are really, really, really quiet. Like you have to really crank the volume up to get any kind of output. So I can kind of see why and understand why a lot of fans were kind of happy that after a while a lot of the stuff got like a facelift, like a Botox behind the board, because sometimes Peter Gabriel's vocals were kind of buried. The stuff that's out there now is much more here in front. So that's the only time that I actually approved of a remaster or anything that was doctored up a little bit. Selling England by the pound. Managed to find that very easily. Again, really nice shape. Genesis Live. This is a great listen. I always thought that Watcher of the Sky sounded better live than what the studio version was, because I assumed that they had a lot more room to breathe. The song was kind of more sunk into their heads of what to do with it live. And you can't deny the fact that Peter Gabriel's costumes and makeup were just such eye candy and just so mesmerizing to watch. I always saw still photos of them, and I saw still photos of Peter Gabriel with all the elaborate makeup and costumes and kind of like this really cool kabuki kind of approach to his stage presence, but I never really sat and zeroed in on it until last year. And it's like, where's this been all my life? Why is it now that I'm just now getting into all this stuff? So we have everything up to basically Wind and Wuthering. That's about as far as it goes with us, because we hear everything from that part forward on the radio at work all the time. We don't need to collect it. It's not really that important to us. This is just basically a second copy the Revelation one, their very first album. And I saw the channel of So I Married a Record Collector actually go through this one, and it literally is just a secondary copy. After all their albums have come out, they kind of went back and kind of, I would say, maybe dug this one up just to kind of let listeners, have an idea of what they were like before they became proggy. So that's the Genesis story, but it's kind of crazy how just you never know. You come back from a vacation or you come back from a trip, and not only are you relaxed and you've got more of a centered feeling about yourself, but sometimes books, art, and especially music, something will creep in and it just sparks an interest. And then suddenly you're going down the rabbit hole and you've got half of the collection of their catalog within like a month or 2 months. And that's all you play. I mean, that's the beauty of music. And then you come back to it, go with something else, and then come back to it, and you're kind of like refueled about that. Like this is great, and why is it now that suddenly this has become like I can't imagine our record collection without the early Genesis catalog. So it's really funny. You just never know what will happen. Yeah, I had to pick it up. It's so common, not much to say about it other than it's the cleanest Frampton Comes Alive pressing that I've ever seen. Again, well loved, well celebrated. It's having its 50th anniversary this year, which is really weird. But again, this thing is in very, very, very nice condition. Not a scratch on it. I think I paid only $15 for that one. I had to pick this up because, number one, it was the cleanest pressing that I've seen, and I really do love the album. I'm not always a fan of a lot of Dan Fogelberg's later stuff because it was very commercial, it was very gloss and very formulated and just kind of slick, so it never latched onto me until later. But I had to pick up his album Souvenirs. It's really cool how many people he has on this album. He's got people from America on here. He's got most of the Eagles. Joe Walsh actually produced the album. Many, many, many people giving him a hand on this. Russ Kunkel, he was a drummer for a lot of different artists back in the day. Carly Simon, James Taylor. It's kind of like a huge neighborhood of the who's who back in the day on one album. And it's a great album. It really is. I don't think there's one bad song on here. And here, he taps into so many different influences, mainly Crosby, Stills, and Nash. But he's got songs that sound like Bread on here. He's got some that almost could pass for a Joni Mitchell outtake. This is a wonderful album, and it's probably the only album I'll ever own of his. But I really enjoy Souvenirs. My dad used to love the song Changing Horses. That was his favorite song, and we wore that one out. Especially the acoustic guitars. It's just so pretty. Had to get this one just because, again, it's in cellophane. It's in really beautiful condition. It's a Doors 13, considered a greatest hits. I think this might have been one of the first compilations of the Doors before it just got a little out of hand. Sometimes they have more album compilations and greatest hits than they actually had studio albums back in the day. But not bad for the original 1973 pressing. So that was really cool to have. My wife got this for me, I think my birthday or Christmas. Really don't remember. I really don't keep track of that kind of stuff other than it was one of those cool days. But don't know if I really touched base on Darlingside with my other videos. Darlingside is a combination of the Byrds and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. And I mean that with harmonies, and I mean that with guitars. They're a very unique band that really isn't signed to any major record label, but they do some wonderful, wonderful songs. I always play these guys when I enter the town of Ferndale because it's their music's like my soundtrack going into town, because it's a little Victorian town, and somehow their music and that Victorian town are very, very much paired up together. It's hard to explain. But this is a great, great listen. I think their record label's called 30 Tigers. I've never heard of that record label, but they're not really on a mission to make it big or to get into the limelight. They just have their own little thing. But if you want some really good kind of acoustic stuff. I would say they almost, and I really stress this word, almost want to be Mumford and Sons, but they don't get there, and that's okay with me because I have a feeling the problem with Mumford and Sons is that they sound very much like the last two songs that they did. There's a formula of the banjo and a formula of certain instruments that just have to be in every song. And for me, that kind of wears me out. It gives me actual musical fatigue. Probably why I don't care for Motown, even though I appreciate things like Motown. But everything to have, it seemed like every song had that certain time signature, and every solo had to have that baritone sax. Otherwise, it wasn't Motown. And that's probably why I don't glom on the formula. It just bores me. But Darlene Side has a way of kind of trying to avoid that. And if you want really good harmony and really good arrangements and like actual acoustic arrangements, check these guys out on YouTube especially. They have some great videos, great concert footage. Lauren and I went to see him a few Octobers ago, and that was a great show. It was really cool to be up at the front row and hear this in the flesh instead of like on TV or on record. Great, great musicians. This is a recent purchase because, as you all know, this is in my top 10. It is David Crosby's If I Could Only Remember My Name, and it's a 50th anniversary edition. Again, I don't normally say these about any kind of remasters or any kind of anniversary editions. I don't normally buy them, but this one was really worth it. I bought this actually sealed, and somebody actually did it right. Somebody actually went back and clean this up a little bit, but not taking away anything or anything's missing. Again, this was a homework album, meaning that I studied harmony, guitar tunings, lyrics, arrangements. This album is very extremely personal to me, and to have it be the 50th anniversary edition and have someone back at the record plant and the mastering and all that stuff done right the first time, it's well worth getting. Couldn't pass this up because you don't see this out in the wild too often. This is a celebration copy, and it's not for sale. It is a white label pressing. And I think it might have been Atlantic or maybe the four of them, but I think they were trying to do this to kind of boost sales with their solo albums because their solo albums didn't necessarily fly off the shelves. Either you liked them or you didn't care for them as much. So I think they were just kind of putting this out, possibly the radio stations, to kind of gain a little bit more traction. So you got one or two off of each solo albums that they put out. So it's really cool to see like a white label promo of this. It's kind of fun. Really a nice shape for like a promo label. But these were only distributed to radio stations. This is one that the public never really got. This is a real treat. Couldn't believe I found this in Shrink. Again, an album that just gets beat up. What is it, $4.98? Can't really read the fine print underneath the sticker, but boy was I super happy to find this one in Shrink. And it sounds amazing. Fantasy Records was actually out of Berkeley, California, just over the hill from Santa Cruz, basically from where I lived as a child, so that was kind of cool. But boy, this thing is really, really in nice shape. I expect most Creedence Clearwater albums to be pretty much in bad shape. A lot of surface noise, a lot of scratches, sometimes skips, but this one I was very lucky to find. Got the original inner sleeve for Cosmo's Factory. So, really cool. These I picked up in one setting just because I had to, and the first two albums are in mono. Probably the cleanest mono versions that I've ever found are pressings. I got the Byrds Mr. Tambourine Man. I find stereo pressings of this that have ring wear worse than anything I've ever seen. But man, that's pretty darn clean for a mono pressing. And a lot of punch. Chris Hillman's bass really is forefront with these mono mixes. Just great. We'll follow it with Turn, Turn, Turn. Tiny bit of ring wear, but nothing major. Again, super clean. And mono pressings are one or two things. They could be pretty much immaculate or they could be absolutely almost unplayable, just depending on what condition and how they were taken care of. stereo version of Fifth Dimension. And this is probably my favorite Byrds album. Younger Than Yesterday is definitely much more experimental because of everything that was going on at the time. So you had more backwards guitars, and you had some sound effects in there that they decided to go ahead and put in. So, but this is a great, great album. I've always loved David Crosby's harmonies. When he passed, it kind of hurt my musical heart, because if there's anyone that I studied how to do third and fifth composite harmonies, it was David Crosby, without a doubt, especially in the Byrds. I love the octaves that he chose as opposed to what should be. That made it so unique and so beautiful to listen to. But there are some wonderful cuts on here. Love this album. These are kind of fun because, again, I don't know how it happens, but it's supposed to be in my direction. The original Blind Faith album from Acto, still in shrink. Beautiful condition, no scratches, no surface noise. Super happy to find that. And then I got a Polydor version, which is interesting, that I've never seen, actually. I love the gold foil sticker of stereo. I think that's great. Again, super clean condition. Very interesting back cover. It says lyrics included, but I don't have the lyrics. I don't know if it actually came with the sheet for this pressing, but nevertheless, kind of cool. Probably my favorite Jackson Browne album, For Every Man. I love the fact that it's still in shrink, because 90% of the time this window cutout is either broken because of the album sleeve going in and out. Long Hair Music apparently was a place in Portland. This was $4.25 back in the day. This is such a great album. I'm not a massive Jackson Browne fan, but between his first one, which people affectionately call Saturate Before Using, that has Dr. My Eyes on it, this one and For Every Man are my two very favorite Jackson Browne albums. Mainly because he's got everybody under the sun, kind of like Dan Fogelberg, backing him up. Elton John's on this playing piano. Glenn Frey from the Eagles, Russ Kenkel, David Crosby, Graham Nash. I mean, there's just a huge neighborly community on this album. Even Bonnie Raitt's on here. Found this a couple months ago, and I just had to get it, and I couldn't believe the condition it was in. It's kind of crazy. It's the Beatles' White Album, and it's got a late serial number here, but regardless, I never had one that had the serial number. I always had like the second pressing, or had something that was similar, but to have it in this good a shape, I was really shocked. I really had to buy this. It's really nice shape. It actually comes with the photos and the lyric sheet. I'm used to seeing this thing up on the wall, so there's no tape and there's no pinprick holes anywhere. Go all four of the photos, which I think has a little bit of tape on the backing of them, you can kind of see, but it doesn't degrade the pictures themselves. They're still in wonderful condition. Again, there's no pinprick holes where push pins were put into someone's wall. These are all in very nice condition. And the Apple album itself sounds amazing. Like Blackbird is super quiet. Julia is super quiet. There's no surface noise during Helter Skelter or Long, Long, Long or any of those hard rocking ones. This was a super find. This one came as a complete surprise to me because I really wasn't thinking that I would ever own a version of this or a pressing of it. I've always had Sgt. Pepper in stereo, and extremely happy to have this. I don't play it too often because it was never one of my very favorite Beatle albums, but I certainly as hell appreciate the accomplishment. And it's, I've always had the actual cutout sleeve. And this is from 1969 or 1970. So I've always had this one, but when I was at Crossroads one time, I kind of had to take almost a triple take and realize, oh yeah, it is that version, and I had to buy it. Believe it or not, it's the mono pressing. And again, I've never seen a mono pressing that didn't have a killer bunch of ring wear or the spine torn. I was kind of shocked that I could actually find this in mono. And there for a while, this was impossible to find before they did all the Beatles box sets and the anniversary sets. This thing was literally what I affectionately call a needle in the haystack. It was so hard to find. It has the original inner sleeve cutout and has the original inner sleeve itself. And for a mono copy, let me turn this around to where it's this. There we go. For a mono pressing, this thing is absolutely gorgeous. I don't hear any surface noise, pops, or clicks with this mono pressing, and they are radically different between the stereo, and I didn't realize till much later on that this is what the Beatles intended it to sound like, not the stereo version. So we're going to stop right there. We're up to about 30 minutes, and that's all this computer can take. So again, thank you so much for watching. I really hope everyone really enjoys what I'm doing here. I'm certainly having so much fun going through all these. I think we got maybe 2 more stacks, so this is going to be like an actual series. It feels like a series of records. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, folks, and click like and subscribe if you like. Leave a comment. Love to get in touch with anybody who has any of these albums or just general information that they want to share with the vinyl community. That would be great. All right, guys, I will see you soon, and we will talk to you later.